or automatically choosing the best available conversation that includes whoever is around.
The first version of this area didn't have any openings on the walls at all. Everything was closed off. We decided that since we were so high up in the hospital and there wasn't any real geometry below, that we could add windows and use 3D skybox to provide this great vista. Once we put windows in, sometimes the hunter attack would push you out of the window. It became scary to get by those windows, and once we realized how much fun it was to get near the risky area, we decided to open up this level as much as possible. So all the walls around the extensive level were just removed entirely. We've got a bunch of areas where some of the props and debris in the environment force you to walk even closer to the edge than you might want to.
Given on the rooftop in the game, we saw Survivor falling off a lot, and it wasn't much fun. So we would make it all the way up here, heading for a checkpoint, and then a zombie would come around the corner, and they'd back right off the edge of the building and fall. We wanted to give them a second chance, and in the process encourage the cooperative type of gameplay we were aiming for. So we came up with the idea of having them grab the ledge and hang there until a teammate helped them. The nice thing about this feature is it also builds tension. As soon as you grab the ledge, the clock starts ticking. You watch your character go from hanging with 2 hands to dropping off to 1 hand till eventually he slips and falls. In the older version, you simply fall and that was it. It was over. So solving a problem consistent with our game design principle led to another opportunity to build team play and tension.
In playtests, people were often confused by certain events and elements in the game. The addition of musical cues helped distinguish these events and diminish player confusion. This was similar to the way that we experimented with distinct visual silhouettes in order to make our characters stand out in a chaotic environment. Audio silhouettes work on a preconscious level and are rarely perceived as intentional.
During our internal playtesting, we ran into situations where a player who had a habit of making bad decisions kept becoming incapacitated to the point where the other survivors became frustrated, continually reviving and escorting this player 5 or 6 times in the space of a couple of minutes. Adding the 3rd strike and you're dead rule solved this issue 2 ways. First, it temporarily took these players out of the game and allowed the rest of the team to proceed and enjoy their experience. Second, the players who died found themselves as a spectator watching the more successful players. This not only gave them the opportunity to learn how the remaining players were surviving, but how they might improve their own performance as well. It also let them cool off and regain their composure in preparation for rejoining the game a minute or so later.
We did it! Can you believe it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Players need to learn from their mistakes as quickly as possible. In early versions of Left 4 Dead, if survivors failed a campaign at any point, we just put them right back at the beginning and made them play the whole thing over again. That meant that if the team dies in the last level, it'll be close to 45 minutes before they ever get back to that map to try something new. This made it hard for players to remember exactly what they'd done wrong, and so it was hard for them to decide what they might want to do differently. So now, when a team goes down, we just reset to the beginning of the level that they died on. This gives them a lot more freedom and flexibility in how they approach the most challenging sections.
All the music in Left 4 Dead, themes, motifs, hits, and effects, are based on a hybrid scale derived from the main opening menu theme. This theme, representing the near death of humanity as it fades to a distance only to be accessed through a radio, is an incremental melodic modulation collecting up all the notes used along the way. The scale is not absolute, and some notes outside the scale are used occasionally to achieve even greater dissonance. But by using the singular and very chromatic scale, almost any piece written in it will generally dovetail pretty decently with any other. At the very least, the pieces seem to spring from the same musical universe. The resulting tunes are deceptively complex, easy to remember but difficult to sing accurately.
When players are moving through the world in a panic and trying to coordinate with their team, the last thing you want them to worry about is which key lets them crouch so they can scramble into a vent. Throughout the game, we tried to simplify movement controls so that players can enjoy the terror of the experience with as little frustration as possible. Here, and at similar obstacles, we make the survivor crouch automatically when they come to a vent. Wherever possible, we try to keep these decisions invisible to players, to keep the illusion that they're moving through this frightening world on instinct without ever thinking about controls.
The hospital rooftop is the finale that saw the most iterations. It's the first one that we ever built. The initial design had the survivors inside of a building with the helipad outside. You would fight inside the building till help arrived, and then you'd go out to the helipad to escape. We found that it was too easy for the survivors to back into a small room and hold out, just shooting the infected as they came through the doorway. This killed the drama because we'd have hundreds of infected attacking the rooftop, but you'd never see them, only the trickle that got through the doorway. We learned through playtests that survivors have a natural tendency to climb up on things. It's like the infected are a flood, and survivors are always trying to get to high ground. So we played to that tendency, building rooftop areas that were easily accessible where the survivors could navigate from one roof to another. Knowing that survivors want to get to high ground, we can anticipate how they'll approach the map, and we can design around that. For example, the infected can scale rooftops from all sides so the survivors can never back into a corner where they're safe. As a bonus, survivors get to actually see the infected running at them from a long distance away, which is a lot more dramatic than shooting at them as they pile through a doorway.
Left 4 Dead was originally going to have a continuous story that started with the hospital campaign. When the chopper pilot picked you up, he would start talking about how he had just done a street pickup and wasn't feeling so well. Clearly he had just been infected and the chopper was about to go down. We found that this left playtesters feeling let down, instead of rewarded for having survived the challenging campaign. We decided to cut that section of the pilot's dialogue and kept the ending upbeat, reinforcing the player's sense of accomplishment.
The tank is an awesome presence on the battlefield. It's the only zombie that can withstand any amount of direct fire. To successfully combat a tank, the survivors need to work together and focus on their target, and even then the chance of catastrophe is high. With all of this power, it's a huge reward when a player gets to play the tank. We wanted to create something that rewarded player performance so it would feel fair, but we also wanted to make sure that it didn't generate a feedback loop, where one player would always end up being the tank. Often when trying to solve a game design problem like this, it's good to look at mechanisms that exist outside of the gaming world that solve the same problems. That way our players will instantly understand the mechanism at play, and we can tap into the same excitement that might already exist for the external mechanism. The tank raffle has the added benefit of announcing to the player zombies when the tank is created, and piquing anticipation for the most exciting part of the game.
In early playtests, when players controlled the tank, we had a major problem with them not behaving in character, totally breaking the game balance of the tank and making him a game ender almost every time. The problem was that an intelligent human player wants to win right now, and the tank was designed to be an enraged berserker that just charges in and starts smashing stuff. Having a tank that can take tons of damage, has an incredibly powerful melee attack, and is smart, hides in choke points, and stays in cover constantly, as a smart human does, was a huge problem. One choice was simply to not allow the tank to be human controlled and to leave it to the AI to drive its behaviors consistently. With that as our fallback, we worked on trying to find a behavior modifier that would encourage human players to act in a more tank-like way. Eventually, we settled on a fairly simple solution, the patience meter. When a human becomes a tank, he has a certain amount of patience, which is shown graphically on his HUD. This patience wears down whenever he can't see the survivors. If the tank's patience runs out, the player loses control of the tank AI and he returns to spectator mode. This allows the player to decide how to engage the survivors, but makes it clear that he needs to get in and start swinging or he'll lose his turn. By making this behavior contract clear to the player, we get the kind of tank behavior we need, and human players get to enjoy causing total chaos as the biggest, baddest boss in the game.
Early in the design of this rooftop scenario, the finale would start as soon as someone hit the radio button. We saw playtesters consistently run up and hit the button without preparing for the battle first. To let players know that they needed to prepare, and to give them time to do it, we changed the design so that the pilot tells them to call him back when they're ready.
Because Left 4 Dead is designed to be played over and over again, we made the dialogue scenes have as many variants as we could cram in. For instance, the encounter with the crazy church guy halfway through the Death Toll campaign includes more than 130 lines spread across 5 characters that can play out about 25 different ways. Variations appear based on which survivor initially uses the door, what other survivors are near that survivor, and random chance. The end result is that players can go through the encounter many times without hearing the same conversation twice.
We knew we wanted homemade weaponry for Left 4 Dead.